the past 5 years. On the healthcare side, and we know that the US healthcare system is in crisis, but 18% of GDP is spent on healthcare, which is the highest in the world, and in fact it's twice the amount spent by the next country. 52 million people don't have any type of health insurance, and a big problem in the US, which will come in a lot with they're trying to get people away from prescription drugs, because 90% of elders are taking at least one drug, and that's very high, and it seems unrealistic to maintain that. And a lot of research has gone into childhood obesity, and we see that increasing. Obamacare just had a huge hit. Just yesterday they've announced that they have to delay the employer requirement to provide health insurance for another year. So the Republicans, which would be the opposition party, are very excited with this news, because it provides them with another 12 months to put in delay tactics and try and get certain parts of Obamacare reversed and so on. But they're pushing ahead, and they're saying that enrollment for different programs will begin on October the 1st. But it really means that a lot of things are kind of in flux at the moment. We'll see how they progress. They did manage to roll out Medicare Part D last year and enrolled 42 million senior citizens. So it has been progressive, and we have seen doctors, physicians get reimbursement from their reimbursement on the electronic health record plans. They're at meaningful use stage 2 at the moment, so money is coming back from Obamacare. But what's important to you is, are you ready to sell into the US market? And if not, how can you become market ready and to develop a strategy around that? You've heard it lots of times. I hear from companies, we plan to conquer the US market by 2015. And I guess the key is really to understand, like knowing the volume and the size of that market and the 313 million people living there. You know, you have to really drill down and pick what part of the US are you going to tackle. And even not only by geographical, but also by product and by sector, because they're all crucial decisions that will affect how quickly you scale and how attractive you are to investors if that's the road you go. So in the market assessment part, when and if you should look at enter the US market, the first thing is to identify the need for your product or service. So to understand what your international selling point is, and this is often different than what your domestic selling point is. So for example, and there's just a slide here, like for example, don't base your USP on your indigenous market. In the IT healthcare market, a client of ours was selling electronic health records, and they developed it in Europe, and they said, oh, the doctors love all of these features and benefits. But when we presented it to the advisors in the US, they told us that they didn't care about that. They didn't see the meaningful use and all those things as a positive. They see it as a negative. And so they're only interested in ticking the boxes so that they can be compliant and not get in trouble. So it meant that we had to flip our marketing and strategy for that company, but it helped to do it early on. On the med device sector, we can tell you that it's all about quality of care. Hospitals are competing for business, and they want to know what product is less painful, provides more comfort for the patient, and so on. So they're willing to pay a little more. You know, price is always an issue, but it's really, you know, a quality product at a fair price is what's key there. So you have to look at the unique selling point from your customer's perspective, and not just any customer, from your US customer perspective, because that will inevitably be different than a domestic market. You want to understand where your customers are, and there's a lot of default for European countries going over to go to the East Coast, or maybe as far as Chicago and Atlanta, but there are so many other states that are often avoided, and they can offer so much value and have such a population, like Montana, or you go into Colorado, and so it's really important to kind of look and figure out where your customers are. The Carolinas are big on healthcare. On the pharma side you spoke of earlier, we know that California and the East Coast are where the clusters are there. So it's really drilling down and seeing where your clients are and where your potential sales are. Pricing is a big issue because it's so important to price it correctly in the beginning. It's easier to price it down than up, and because we're small companies going into the US, the challenge is often competing on price and how long you can take the hit and to make a loss, you know, for the first year or two. To be realistic about that on your budget and to understand where you can tap into that and figure out your pricing, and the lawyers will help with this transfer pricing to understand the taxes and figure out where they fit in. The geographic distribution, or how you're going to sell your products, there's lots of options there. We'll talk a little bit more about that with regard to perhaps doing direct sales in one state and then rolling out your sales to distributors or resellers or agent sales on the other states. So we looked at the IC. So some practical advice on the market entry would be that to use available free resources. So there's so much data already collected, and you know the internet has advanced so much that you'll find a lot of it. Most current information is available through blogs, and if you look for like an industry expert like Colin Campbell, for example, on the nutrition side, Colin Campbell issues a blog quite often, and in there he'll talk about new developments in market. So rather than paying for priority research reports, you'll often find that industry bloggers will give you a lot of that data for free, and they will quote the standard reports, and that will save you time and money. Speak to companies who sold in the US, and this has changed a lot. So I would say that 4 and 5 years ago companies were very secretive and they weren't as good as sharing their experiences. But because of the recession, people are more open to explaining the mistakes that they made and to save you time. And they'll make introductions, because often they'll be introducing you to someone who you're not competing with, but it could be a partner product, or it could be your product could add value to their offering as well. So don't be afraid to ask people to tell you their story and to share experiences over a coffee, or connect on Skype or whatever it is you need to do. With regard to trade shows and market visits, again, for the market assessment, we recommend that you go to a trade show, a relevant trade show, as a delegate first, and visit the different competitors and attend the seminars and gather all the market information. It's often when we're working away on our products and we're working on our own innovation, it's important that we see what other innovative products are coming on the market so that we can place ourselves and position ourselves competitively when we do come out. You'll also learn the basics, like their language and their marketing terms that they use in the US, and you can use this. You'll find this on their websites as well, of course, but often in person you'll find out more. And the scale of the market you'll often find when you go to these trade shows. It isn't as visible when you look on the website as when you're in person. You see all the different competitors, and we see this from HIMSS, which is the Health Technology Conference that's on every year. It's huge. It's nearly overwhelming. So you really need to plan before you go, but you can learn a lot from it. Definitely, as you prepare to go into the US, and while you're figuring out whether it's the right thing to do, there's no harm to have an initial consultation with a lawyer. You remember that they want your business, so a US lawyer will speak to you for free, and they'll just give you some little tips on things to look out for, and maybe direct you if you need to have a patent or FDA approval. They can at least alert you to that early on, so you don't go 5 steps forward and then realize that you have to go all the way back. So definitely take advantage of that. I'll call it a free service, because potentially they want to engage with you so that you become a long-term customer. And like we said, look at your competitors, look at where they're based, how they're selling, and how they're pricing their goods. Are they using direct sales or resellers, or a mix of both? So you want to set yourself measurable targets, and what's really important for smaller companies going into the US is to be realistic about these and understand about when they will make a profit and how long and how much money they have in the bank to get to that stage. So what's really here, you have to decide internally and with your board what you define success as. So having a clear plan of action, allocating appropriate financial and support resources to implement the plan, setting milestones that allow you to track your progress, and defining success for your company and sharing it with your US team is crucial. Now, these are overviews, but basically what we're saying is that you have to understand that in year one, you likely will not make any money, and your customers will be loss leaders, but they will give you the baseline to then get profit-making companies. So everybody on the team, and particularly the board, need to be on the same page on this. They need to be realistic about the expectation that's upon you, and then the willingness to partner or to resell the products and losing that 40% because the reseller will take on your product, or going with the distributors and being able to discuss and kind of making a plan around what they would define as successful then, and being realistic about that. Ways, I guess practical advice on this is that often we find European companies are using a CRM here in Ireland or in Europe, like Salesforce or Sugar or whatever it is. That might not be as effective in the US. So you can't be trying to get the US market to fit into existing sales models here. You have to accept that the US is a different market and perhaps use a different CRM, even a free one, starting off like Zoho or something, or else adopting your own CRM for the US market, but don't try and get it to fit in. We found this in the past where the sales cycle has been different in Europe, and then the board were getting frustrated because the sales weren't delivering timely, but the reality was that the sales cycle in the US was completely different, and therefore the measurements within the CRM were inaccurate and confusing and caused a lot of unneeded stress. Hold people accountable, so give people a role and tell them what your expectations are, and hold them to it. Follow up regularly, discuss it, find out why things aren't happening. Whether you're using a distributor or a direct hire, you have to treat them like a full-time member of your team in your head office, and discuss with them, how many sales meetings they had, how did they get on, and so on. Forming an advisory panel to assess your strategy early on is definitely probably one of the strongest bits of advice we'd give to companies. And I'll tell you that experienced professionals in the US are quite happy to come together on an advisory panel and meet with companies because they want to be part of innovative products and they are happy to share their knowledge. It can be as simply as bringing them around the table for an afternoon where the company presents on the product and their strategy for the US and then takes the feedback. Or if that works out well, you can actually create an advisory board from that where they would meet quarterly or twice a year to follow on from the support. The advisors often become your first customers or indeed an excellent referral system to people who will buy your product or service. Do understand the costs involved in sales and expansion. I think this is underestimated a lot. I mean, on hiring alone, a key hire might be $100,000, and you need to add on another 30% there, just on the supports for that employee. On the setup, you can set up for as little, as $2,000 and support it virtually from your home country for, not too much, maybe $500 a month. But the reality in sales and getting into big companies and presenting, you need to have an adequate budget in place. Definitely, it's a lot that something that needs to happen at board level is to understand those costs and see if it's a reality for the company at this stage. Be prepared to compromise, like we said earlier. Sometimes you might need to adjust your planning to not hold on to all the sales by direct sales, but to go the distributor route or to partner with another company and sell in bulk. So just be open to that. And then identify and implement your sales plan in one sector or area. And this kind of applies a lot for healthcare products, is that if you go down the pharmaceutical route and you go into large pharma and that's who you want to sell into, then you get classified into a certain area. If you go into healthcare, like natural healthcare, and you start selling into that area, you're eliminating yourself from one or the other. So you need to take your time, speak to advisors, and figure out how best to tackle the entire healthcare market without getting branded and locked into one section. So for a lot of the healthcare technology sales, the first thing you're going to do is engage with a pilot site to get your reference customers, get them using and get the user feedback. And just let me take a few minutes to look at that relationship so that it can be the most valuable to you. So be strategic about selecting your beta site. Just because somebody offers to use your software for free doesn't mean that they're the best person to be using it. So you need to kind of create a profile of your ideal beta site and then look to achieve that or close to it. Manage expectations, like establish guidelines regarding your expectations of the beta site. So what do you expect from them? You don't want them signing up for software and you implemented it either on the cloud or in person and then finding out that they haven't logged in for 3 weeks. So you need to sit down with them and say, if you're going to be our beta customer, we want to see 3 users, we'd expect certain data to be entered and the feedback to be coming back, and lay that out in a contract, in an agreement, so they understand their commitment as well. There is a difference between an advocate and a customer, and it was quite interesting. A client of ours recently had a CRM software, and their advocate was using it and giving them feedback regularly, maybe once or twice a day even, and the guys were making all the changes. And then it switched to a paying, so the beta sites went into paying customers, and that person never engaged again, never used the software, never paid $1. So he was a great advocate, and he was a great supporter, and he was good for feedback, but he was never going to be a customer. So you need to figure out and distinguish between those people early on, so that you can make plans internally as to who will be the leader. So like we said, create a formal agreement and include an NDA. And the reason for that is inevitably there will be issues with releases of software and updates and so on. And an NDA will give you some type of limited protection just in case the software goes down. We don't want people speaking about issues that they had. So the NDA will protect you from that. And when you go to market, it'll give you a stronger footing. Keep your beta sites informed. If you are going to go down over the weekend, if you do need to make changes, if you do need to pull it back, it's okay. They're beta sites. That's what they should expect. But it is crucial that they're kept apprised of what's happening, developments in the product, good and bad. You need to distinguish between wants and needs of these feedback from the beta sites, because of course we'd all love if the computer we could talk and it could type properly, or all of the different bells and whistles that we'd like in software. But from your perspective and from your product, you want to make sure that you're developing features that are needed by the customer as opposed to a wish list. You can have a wish list and put it to the side and address it as needed, but in the immediate, your focus should be on what the product has to have to be a minimal viable product. So what does the product have to have so that you can sell it in the US? Your beta sites should have that early adopter attitude and must agree to act as a reasonable reference. And what that means is you will expect a testimonial from them. Some of them, you will expect them to do a speaker's program and speak about your product and your software at a dinner program or a seminar and so on. You'll find within the beta sites a champion, the person who you have identified as key and who is most passionate and most knowledgeable and most engaged in your product and your software. Identify that person and work with them to build up the relationship. They need to provide benefits feedback and product feedback. So you want to ensure that it's the right fit for the market. So yes, it's great that it can run all these reports and that it has all these different product features. But what are the benefits to the customers? So that's important for you to decide it. Does it save them time? Does it save them money? Does it make their job more efficient? Will it eliminate staffing for them? So you have to look outside the box and say, the data entry takes 5 minutes. It's done by one person. If somebody at the front desk would do it, it would take 7 minutes. And do the calculation so that at the end of the week they can see from a dollar value what the benefit feedback would be. And the benefit feedback will be the elimination of one job and all the costs that go around that, or the efficiency for a customer. Look at that quality of care. If they know that they can access it on an app or at home, or they have up-to-date instant real-time data, all those things would be benefit feedback as opposed to the product feedback. So similar to your pilot site, your first reference site if you're selling a product in the US is key, and you need to make sure that it's relevant to your potential market. And this is a challenge because, like I said, if you have a customer who offers to take your product, we love that. We'll sell it in our shop, we'll buy it from you, we'll put it on the shelf in our healthcare store, and then you have all this trouble delivering to, I don't know, Omaha or wherever it is in the US. You have to figure out, is it worth it? Is that the right reference site for your sector? Will that reference even matter? So you need to really profile that first reference site and go after it strategically. You want to make sure that that reference site will give you credibility in your sector, and be sure that you have the resources to deliver. The US has zero tolerance for overpromising and under-delivering. So if you say that your product can do something, it should be able to do it. If you promise product will be on the shelf in 6 weeks, it needs to be on the shelf because they're holding a spot, and an empty shelf is a decrease in sales. So be careful not to overpromise. And understand that your reference sites and your pilots will be loss leaders initially. And we're going to talk about break-even points shortly. So also when looking at the market, you really need to figure out on the timelines, things you need to look at for timeline perspective initially are on the legal and compliance side. If you do need FDA approval or to file a patent or any of the compliance issues, what are the timelines for approval on those? You know, we've seen them take as long or as little as 2 years, and some will even take a lot longer, but once it's filed, it buys you some time. And you'll be getting the feedbacks and going back with the edits. So look into that early. This will also affect your sales and marketing. So if you have pulled the advisory board together and spoken to them and taken their feedback, then your sales and marketing materials that you create will be based on that feedback, on your focus group feedback, on your advisor feedback, and it'll be much more US specific. So don't do that before you go and get this feedback. Setting up a US entity early on will give you some more visa options. A lot of them you need to be established for 6 or 12 months before you can apply, so just be aware of that, and again, use that lawyer conversation to ask those questions. Be prepared to pivot. You may go into the US with a plan to sell directly and land up going to distributors, or going into pharma and land up going into natural product sales. So I guess you have to understand that when you get to the market and you meet your focus group and your advisors, things might change. Continually assess the market conditions, and again, you can do this by using those free resources we talked about that are available from the bloggers and the industry experts online. So let's just look a little bit at sales and marketing. So you need to develop a plan and determine the best avenue for sales, whether they're direct sales, contract sales, distributors, or an agent. So what a lot of European companies do going into the US is they keep one state for direct sales, and that becomes their beachhead strategy. So basically that's their HQ in the US. They hire staff, they directly sell, they bring the feedback back on the product to the home office, and they're the direct contact with the customer. But then from that they can also then, through other states and through other geographic areas, roll it out to resellers who will take on all the hassle of the sales. So a reseller will sell the product, will do the training, will do the upgrades, and you just feed it through. The cost of a reseller, they typically take about 40% of the margin. So just to be aware of that, so when you're planning ahead. You can also use contract sales. If you don't want to hire full-time initially, use a contract sales company to hire people to work and sell your product either on a short-term basis, which is like 3 months initially to see if it's working, or on a part-time basis, which would be like 2 or 3 days a week over a longer period of time. Distributors are a very effective way to get your product to a larger market. The key things here for companies going to the US is to be careful of exclusive contracts. They'll often offer you the world, and really they can sign you into an exclusive contract for 2 years and your product might never hit the shelves. So it's important when it comes to distributors to never sign an exclusive, and secondly, to treat them like you would contract sales or direct sales. You know, speak to them regularly, ask them where they're putting your product, when and how many units, and set up like a weekly call or bi-weekly and be consistent with that. So regardless of whether it's a holiday here or there, every Thursday at 4 o'clock you have this conversation. It might last 10 minutes or 2 hours depending on where you are in the sales cycle. We recently became aware of a company who we started working with them after this, but they've been in negotiations with a large US distributor for 18 months. But they were very excited. They said, oh, we're nearly signed up with these guys, and when we do, we're going to be in every chemist all over the US. So I'm like, how long are you negotiating with them? And they said, oh, it's been 18 months. They're doing all this research. So we went and did some research, and really what the distributor was doing was delaying the contract because the competitors' products that they sold were coming out with a new version. And the new product had the bells and whistles that our client had. So they had no intention of signing our client. They were just delaying tactics so that their competitor, when they went back on the shelf with their new product, would not have this competing product. So it's if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true. So just be aware of that. It's harder to find agents to sell your product on commission. You need to be careful because US salespeople are aggressive, which is excellent, and they have lots of contacts and they'll work very hard. But as the analogy goes, you get what you pay for. So often you're better off going the salary route or going with a commission and a base route to give people an incentive to drive it forward. If you are hiring someone, just remember that there are two types of sales rep. The coin-operated person is the person who will sell a product, and they're great salespeople, but they're not business development people. They won't be looking for new opportunities or coming back and telling you what other products you want. You can typically get like a coin-operated sales rep between $30,000 and $40,000. A Renaissance sales rep is somebody who's come from large corporate America, has sales experience, has business development experience, and will push out your product or service. And they come with a much higher price tag, often between $70,000 and $150,000. So you have to figure out what's best for your business and what's best for your budget. So like we said, the break-even point is what's important for you, and it's when your profits are greater than your losses. So just the initial setup costs in the US are staff, insurance, your sales and marketing materials and your website, the legal fees from the lawyer, if you need patents, hospitality, taking potential customers to dinner, buying, like all of those things will add up, and they're initial US costs. That's the minimum you'll need to do business in the US. And we have them listed here again, whether the various things like your web page and your lawyer and the bank account, all the basics to set up that will have costs involved. So I guess for me, the next few slides are the most important, the practical tips for you entering the US market. So in the US, it's expected that you're proactive and to understand the US business culture. So yes, they'll spend time and they will ask you about your family, and then they expect you to have the ask. So if you go into a meeting, it's good to be polite and have a social conversation, but they won't ask you for the business. So they'll expect you to go in and say, the reason I'm meeting you today is because I would like you to buy our product. I'd like you to try our software. So go in with the ask, be proactive, ask the question. And if the answer is no, if it's not suitable, because you can ask them why not. So why isn't our software applicable to your company? And they'll often tell you it's because it doesn't have a certain feature. And that will give you enough information to go back to the drawing board. They may also refer you to a different department or to a colleague or a friend. So it's okay to ask the questions as to why not, and it's definitely okay to ask for business. Be responsive, so respond to emails within 24 hours, and even if you don't have the answer, then call them or email them back and say, we're still working on finding out that information for you, or we're still working on the solution to that problem. Don't ignore them if you don't have the answer. Pick up the phone. There's so much, people are emailing and so much now, and IMing and so on, that we forget about the value of having a conversation over the phone. What you find there is that you'll have to get more information from them, and they'll release more, maybe about the timelines for purchase, or why it won't be a good idea, or if they're going to refer you on to somebody else. And do call within their business hours. So don't call when you know they're not there and leave a voicemail. You really want to get that face-to-face time. There's no a block of holidays in the US. Typically, vacation time or holiday time is 10 to 20 days a year. So 4 weeks is usually the maximum over the 52-week period that people have off. So I'd say that August is a quieter month because people tend to get out of the cities because it's hot. But generally, like the holidays are days. So Christmas Day is one day. There's no holidays around it. Today is the 4th of July. It's obviously a national holiday in the US, and so everybody's off. But people will be back to work tomorrow. Some people try and take the long weekend, but it's not a week-long holiday, so just be aware of that. Adequately resource your US expansion, your staff, and your messaging, and that's just back to costs. Just be prepared in your budget to understand that it will cost you money to go there, both for staffing and for marketing. Your social media, it's not going away, so you need to understand the trends, engage experts, initiate discussion. Like we said, look at the blogs, figure out what social media resource is best for you and use it. You don't have to be on all the different platforms, but you do need to monitor them, at least one of them, to figure out what's going on in your industry and use it to your advantage. Like we talked about earlier, have realistic expectations about the costs and the opportunities in the US. Develop a customized US sales and marketing strategy. Engage with a core group of industry and specific thought leaders. So they're your advisors. So you want people who have expertise in your industry. So engage with them early on because they'll become your advocates, they'll become your customers, and they'll become your referrals. With regard to the lawyers, we were saying that often the cheapest lawyer is not the best, and you might need to find a specific lawyer in healthcare, for example, or in nutrition or whatever it is, who can give you expertise in that area. A good tip is to use that lawyer to draft your first contract, because then you have a template going forward, and it won't be as expensive. But the first contract should definitely be done by a lawyer, because there's so many nuances in US state and federal law that you don't want to leave a gap in that first important contract. A good idea too is to register your company name, sorry about that, to register your company name or trademark early in your plan for the US, even if you're not going there in the next 12 months. We recently worked with a client, and when they went to check, an Australian company had registered with a trademark, and we called them up and said, when are you planning to go to the US, and can we buy it, the company name? And they said it's in our business plan for 2015. So 2 years ahead, they've bought the company name, they bought the website, and they've no intention of going to market. So they're inexpensive ways to start, putting a footprint in the US market and getting market ready. So understand, like we said earlier, the certifications that you need if you need to file a patent, if you need to get FDA approval. Engage with those professionals early on so you can get the process moving. Local and state taxes are different, and there's different sales tax in different states which will affect your pricing. So it's a good idea to set up an appropriate accounting management system early and get a local accountant who'll just help you maximize the tax benefits and make sure you're getting benefit for all that, the travel and expenses in doing business. Like we said, you need to be able to fund your sales and marketing, and be flexible. So a big message coming out of the US of late is that it's no longer acceptable to fly in and fly out. They expect you to be visible, they want to see you, and they need you to be available. They're not tolerant if you don't make a meeting because you got turned away at the airport because you didn't have the appropriate visa. They're not interested in hearing that, because we all know that it's now possible to go to the US for short terms to do business. Your home team on the support side needs to work US hours, and definitely something to look at on the contract side when you're hiring new people is to put that in as part of standard business hours so that it doesn't become an issue. They'll expect you to be available to pick up a call, and you can just assign someone in-house to take that responsibility on the European holidays that are not holidays in the US. It's also okay to walk away. I think this is important because often companies will look at different markets, and we worked at a company who looked at Canada and California and had a contract in both. But on assessment, even though they'd invested some money into the California market and got a customer and broke even, the opportunity for them was in Canada. So don't keep digging deeper and deeper. If you have to take a step back and assess the value of the market, and is the US right for you? So do that regularly, and do that with your board. Every 6 months to a year. Look at those measurable goals we talked about. See where you are and see where you want to be. Just wanted to very briefly touch on, a case study. So, one of your clients who is looking to the US, and how do you become investment ready? So, what can you do to prepare to meet with US investors? So the good news is that America is back funding SMEs and is more tolerant of foreign-owned companies. And we heard this at the Big Four meeting that was last week in New York. And they're telling us that they will absolutely look and invest in foreign-owned companies. They're quite honest, so they'll tell you right away if they're interested or not. But these are what they'll expect from you. So they'll expect a detailed business plan with projections and capitalization and all the details. They'll expect a marketing plan, and your marketing plan is really a summary business plan, but it takes out the financials as such and talks about where your customers are, how you plan to reach them, and why you think they're going to buy from you. Because again, customer is king. You need to understand why this customer would want to buy your product as opposed to the competing products. I'd say that in your marketing plan, you need a SWOT analysis, not only of your product, but nearly of each sector you plan to sell into, or indeed of each large contract that you hope to get. Focus groups are a cheap and efficient way to get information. It's about creating like open-ended questions so that the information you gather is objective. You can gather some key tools here. It's a great way to get feedback on your brand, and really, like I said, a lot of the times, particularly with software, is that we get very excited with the features, and we know all the hard work that's gone in to develop the different benefits of the product, but we want to understand, does the customer care? And I have some product launch flaws at the end of this that you can look at offline, but for example, if you look at Segway, so Segway are that kind of scooter, the motorized scooter, and it was a great idea. It was an innovative product, and everyone's like, wow, that's so cool. But the reality was that nobody wanted to pay $4,000 for it. And the reality was, when the battery ran down, it got slow and it caused accidents and so on. So right now, the Segway is still in effect. It's being used in the US by the police force and by warehouses. But the general public, who their target audience was for, are not purchasing it. The price tag was too high. It's too bulky on the sidewalks. It got banned from a lot of municipal areas. So again, by having that focus group early on and having these open-ended questions, you can gather all that information. Commercial insurers will review your business plan when you're looking for investment, and they'll be looking for gaps. What's missing? What are the risks in this business plan? So it's really important that you prepare that with an objective eye, understanding that the commercial insurer, will be looking at that and giving advice to the investors. They'll want to see your research. It's great to have the summary stats on that, but they want to know where did you get it and how did you do it, and have the appendices available should they wish to look at them. You need to be aware of what's going on in the legal environment, policy challenges or opportunity. We spoke a little bit earlier about Obamacare and what's happening there. It's been delayed. The requesting employers to provide employees with health insurance if you're more than 50 staff has now been put off for a year. Like that kind of policy change will have a direct effect on sales and purchases in the US. They want to see your capitalization input, your equity structure, where it's based, how much you've already given away, and what the potential is there to recap their investment. They'll expect you to have an advisory board or a strong board at home, and they would like to see you building that board with a customer on it or potential investors. So you need to think strategically about that early on in the process. Finally, most importantly for the US, you need to remember that relationships are key. So Americans definitely do business based on relationships, and the good news is they're very good at referring you on to other people if they want to work with you, but they want to hear back on what happened. So if you get a referral, a thank you and a follow-up to let them know what happened. You're not going to get a deal in the first meeting. You should expect, on average they say it's 6 meetings, so 6 encounters to close that contract. So you really need to invest time. But they do, people buy from people, and I think in the US this is particularly so. And word of mouth travels fast for such a large country. The good news travels fast, and so does the negative of. I never heard back from that company where they promised that product would be on the shelf and it wasn't. So just be aware of that when you're planning your strategy for the US. We can be reached anytime, either in our Ireland or New York office. We're also on Twitter, and you can. My colleague Niall will be in touch next week with anyone on the webinar to see if they want a follow-up consultation. We'll be happy to talk to you individually and answer any questions that you have. This is just an appendix really that you can look at later, and it's just to look at some failed launches of some US companies, large ones, but all the same lessons that we can learn as an SME going into the market. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was really informative, at least for me. So there was one question I was personally kind of typing in that in Europe we are very used to get all the health services for free. I know in US it's not as good as that, but for the company's point of view, how are the usual people ready or willing or used to buy the digital services or e-health or m-health services from
Oh, I'm
companies?
sorry, I just lost you. I'm sorry, I just lost the last part of that question.
Okay, okay. How willing or ready or used are the Americans to buy e-health or to pay from their own pocket for the e-health or m-health services?
They are, because there's so much choice, even though you're paying for it in the US, it's all about quality of care, and so the customers want the best. So they will pay for products and e-health services and so on
Mm-hmm.
if it's giving them an added value. And there's so many private clinics and so on. They need to distinguish themselves from their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
So having these additional services is what allows them to pitch, because just like we're selling our products and services, so are they. Basically, the whole healthcare market is a vendor.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to distinguish themselves. So yeah, they're willing to pay. I mean, you won't get the government, like the Medicare patients and so on, that are on limited budgets, and it is harder to sell into the government on the healthcare side, but on the private side, it's absolutely open.
Mm-hmm. How big is the private clinics market at all? Like, are they big? Are they chains? Are they usually small?
They're we'd say that, for example, in New York State, we have North Shore LIJ, North Shore Long Island Hospital System. That's 16 hospitals. Now, they would take a mix of both what we would call here in Europe public patients and private
Mm-hmm.
patients. So some Medicare patients and then some insurance companies. So they do tend to join together. So North Shore would have started off small enough, and it's purchased more and more hospitals. So they're growing, and
Mm-hmm.
likewise like the Mayo Clinic in Cleveland and so on. So they build up, and then they do have purchasing cycles. So in the procurement department, we would be able to identify when they purchase certain products, and often they don't review the vendors then for another 18 months or 2 years, or it can be as long as 3 years. But once we become aware of that cycle of when they look again at different products, then we're able to prepare and have meetings to slot in to then pitch for that open window, which is often just 3 months.
Uh, how's the reimbursement system in UK, in US, concerning the e-consultations? Is there any, or that's mostly private then?
Yeah, I mean, right now with Obamacare, like physicians are getting incentives and money back, but on when you say reimbursements, you're referring to.
Yeah, I guess in US case, it's mostly insurance companies who
Oh
cover
yeah,
the
yeah,
cost of
yeah.
visits.
So they're very strict. It's all coding. So the insure for the physicians, they have to code each visit, and depending on the code, that's how much money they get back from the
Uh,
insurance companies,
but are
and
there
they're
any
always
tools
trying.
specifically for e-health consultations, or this is not?
I don't know. I
Uh,
would need to research that. I'm not aware of any specific for the e-health, but perhaps I'll look into it and get back to you on that one.
because we have several companies in that area. And how is it with the hospitals? What's their kind of, let's say, financing scheme? Do they have motivators to reduce the costs, or in reality they don't and use modern technologies and so forth?
They tend to bundle, so what if they would like, their preference is that whatever electronic health system they're using is doing lots of things, because they can squeeze and get the best price then from that vendor because they have all this opportunity. But they will put the pressure on the vendor to partner with companies who can deliver what they can't, and to integrate with that software, to deliver add-ons. So we'd say that a lot of the older software companies mightn't have the agility to have patient portals or any of those, like you said, the e-health apps and so on. So they might put the pressure on them for them to figure out how to bring the solution into the hospital. They don't like to have a lot of different vendors. They want them all operating off the same platform,
Yeah,
basically.
okay, okay. How is it, for example, when we have a company called Cognius, and they have a brain rehabilitation gaming tool for stroke patients, for example. How does the America take the clinical trials? When they have the clinical proof in, I don't know, Scandinavia, for example, is that kind of relevant for US, or the US definitely wants to have their local validation, clinical validation?
Their preference would definitely be the local validation, from an accredited, like in Boston, there's certain hospitals that will do that for you or take it on, and throughout the US. And their preference, because they can manage it better and the outcomes, and they know that you're dealing with, if there's, the specific patients in specific areas and environments. So that their preference would definitely have a clinical trial done locally. We've seen this recently with a Singapore client where they had done a lot of the clinical trials in Singapore, and in order to get into the larger hospitals, the expectation was that they invested in a 6-month trial in the US.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then did you also get that the one-pager from the company called GPA Global Pharma that Pia was sending to you, offering packaging and manufacturing services?
I didn't see that one. I only saw Diet Booster.
Yeah, that was okay. But then I guess we go to that booster, but please take a look at that. Pia was the one sending it to you. I guess straight after my mail.
Okay, I'll check it. And they have
2nd of July. It should have gone through.
Okay, that's what 2 days ago.
So take
they
a look
have contract packaging.
Just answer back to her and the Anu is the person. I guess she will forward it to her, so you can agree as a meeting plan. But how about the diet booster then? Can you give some hints like what they should do, or is there at all any sense for them to try it?
Yeah, I think that first of all, like if the fact that it's more scientific, shall we say, and it's able to refer to the negative caloric and value. If it can be as specific as that, the US customers would like it. I think that, like I said, and that was kind of the investor slide, we see them looking at the investors. They will need to see like who they I know they identified Weight Watchers and the various other ones that kind of do similar plans. And you're right, it's the point in the diary is not attractive. I think it's exhausted, say, in the U.S. market, and they had done the right thing by identifying that target market of people who have tried and failed, say, and so are looking for something new. But Americans like outcomes, and I think that what Diet Booster has that some of the other products don't have is specificity, like saying exactly this is how much calories you took in and so on. And that will be attractive to the U.S. investors, but I would recommend that they go to I don't know if they've been to a trade show already, basically just to confirm what's in the market, and then to identify some people on the nutrition side, on the diet side on the US, who would come together and they could present to for an afternoon, ideally in person. So coming either down in the Carolinas is quite probably the strongest market there for that type of product, because there's so many institutions dealing with health. But if not, in New York or Boston, and sitting around a table and demoing it and taking the hit of the industry experts, that's, and then maybe from there forming the advisory board. I think that's where they are in the market entry now, because they'll need to, unless they've done that, the investors will need to see that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but then to finish up, if I don't see any questions at the moment, we will I'll definitely send them the recording, and if you can send me the slides. But but then also just if you can specify like how, on what terms you would be ready to help our companies, because as I said, we still have quite some bankers in the US. So like how we could, I don't know, agree the initial Skype meeting for a concrete company, I guess, first, and then see how we could proceed.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess what I propose is that we'll do an initial Skype, like a consultation, like just 30 minutes with the companies, and then kind of based on where they are, I can come back to you with proposals, see which would be which are ready and who are not, because often in 30 minutes it might just be advice to say, focus on these things and come back in 12 months. And for those who are ready, then we can put something together, and we really do have, a step-by-step strategy for that, from the business plan through to the investor pitch.
Great. Okay, great, thanks to you. It was really very informative and many interesting facts, at least to me.
Okay, good. And thanks so much for everyone participating. And like I said, feel free to reach out to us anytime.
Yeah. Okay. And enjoy the holidays.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Take care.
Okay. Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye.